I had to cut a little bit more than what I originally suspected. A total of about 5.5 inches more. That led me to invest in a skill saw and 10 of these cut-off blades. And I would like to say, I will never cut double frame with oxyacetylene torches ever again. That thing takes longer, is hotter, and is more expensive than investing in a $50 saw and, you know, $10 worth of cutting wheels to get a better result. I just want to show this to everybody because I'm by no means perfect, and I don't think you should really take anybody as such. And I'm not warranting this because I could have totally changed what I wanted to do. Well, that's the input shaft and the spline shaft for the drive shaft. It's a lot of shaft words, but just know the distance that is away from this back coupling is as close as I would ever want it. Because when this drive shaft right here, which is connected up to the differential, moves, it is when there is weight on it. These are the springs. Obviously you know that. It's what the suspension is really running off of. Here's one mounting point. Here's a brace, so as it compresses, it actually adds more spring weight to it. But when you have something heavy on this frame, it weighs down the springs, and therefore causes this whole geometry of the engine, which is mounted to the frame, and the axle to change. Now on the back of the engine obviously is the transmission, then it goes into this first drive shaft, then into the second. This is the slip between those two. I messed up. I only needed to cut about 3.5. So, moral of the story, you can still mess up even when you're trying your hardest to do it right, but live with the consequences and don't get bent out of shape. I've got that piece right there that I cut out of the old frame. I'm going to weld that in to tack it together. I've got the other half of it that I'm going to cut down just enough to fit in above there. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side, then build it up, put another separate piece inside of here, and then maybe even one more on the very outside. And I'm going to make it stronger than it ever was, probably, with that reinforcement when it was butted up together. This has turned into a longer project than I thought, but I've never done it before, and in truth, this is probably going to be the best way to do it. If I was just to butt both of these pieces of frame up together and weld them, even if I had my drive shaft length perfect, you know, the separation was perfectly designed for that motion of the compression, I don't believe I could get enough penetration, even with a pretty sizable bevel, to go and connect up both of these pieces as properly as that will be. Learn from your mistakes, but don't let it ruin you. Because I am somewhat of a perfectionist. I understand that it doesn't seem like it whatsoever, but I do have that trait, I feel. When stuff like this happens, it's a common tendency to feel like you are a mistake. Don't lead yourself down that path, because mistakes happen, and oftentimes they're better than making no mistake at all. Because I have learned, and I will remember this, hopefully, for the rest of my life. So far, this is my solution. As you can see, I've cut up a piece of the old frame rail and welded that with a good bit of coverage. I haven't done the underside really well yet, but I have done the top, ground it down, and the bottom. Got that lined up as good as I can. It doesn't really come through that well, but I feel that that's somewhat level. I still need to adjust whenever I weld it in. And I've also taken another piece, this is that 90-degree flat bar, and cut it to where now fits perfectly. And once I run a bead of weld around the whole exterior of this, build it up, and then chop it down, I'll be able to put another casing of the same style, that same 90-degree outer casing, to join these two pieces together and finish this side. Well, here's how it's going so far. I'm gonna run a bead right in here, connecting up everything, and then chop all this off. But it's enough to support itself. I've got nothing underneath either side, and I'm about to get that side lined up and weld in this piece right here. Get that all racked up, use that channel, grind down the inside of it obviously so it bonds better. Then once I'm done with both of these sides, getting them to about the same point, I'm going to grind down, cut another little section of this 90-degree angle, have it stretched just about a ½ inch away from either side, get this flat all the way up and down, weld it in, grind it level, and make it look like this is completely flat and never was touched before. I'm starting to think that I might be left-handed when it comes to welding. Obviously that's not very good, but the bird dookie that is on this side does not propone, and that's literally 3 inches apart, done around the same time. But regardless of my junk welds that I'm going to grind down and redo, I've got this side all buttoned up. I haven't done the interior welds yet. I've barely tacked on the interior welds on that side, but I'm going to save all that till I can get the exterior done, because the interior is going to kill me if it's hot. And right now I'm waiting for a thunderstorm to roll in, lower the temperature, and then I'm going to weld while the thunderstorm is occurring outside, and hopefully a tree doesn't fall on me. So I've got this just mocked up a little bit. I'm going to take this back off, grind down the sides, make a bevel, grind down the sides on this, do the same on that side, weld her in there, same on that side. Right there's the pillow block. There's the pillow block mount. Here are the brackets that I robbed off of both this pillow block and this one on the old section of frame. And I bet you're already wondering, why am I doing that? Well, about right here is where the old pillow block would sit, obviously, to be supported and bolted in. The new pillow block, however, is missing that by just about 3 inches. So, in order to conserve time, because my other two options would be to remove these rivets, which have been welded in there, move this mount forward 3 inches, and somehow re-weld it to the surface, or move the whole cross member forward 3 inches, I'm going to weld these two supports together. Well, I've got this mounted in here. As you can see, it's pretty sturdy, but I don't like the fact that I can pick up on the drive shaft and it move. So I'm going to cut using the other mounting bracket and mount that to here. I've got my tap right here, tapping out these holes to hopefully make sure that the bolts fit in there. I had some issue with it coming off that I think I stripped some of the threads out, but I'm going to fix that and then put the cap on top of it. Here I've got that cut off section. I'm going to clean up the inside of this, weld it. These are all the ends to the air lines. I've got none of them hooked up, mostly for the fact that they're 3 foot too long, and when I was taking them off, every single one of these fittings broke. The airline, as far as I can tell, is good. I bought a mixed set of fittings. Both of these lines are different sizes. Here you've got 3/8, and then you got 1/2 inch right here. So I bought a mixed bag of plastic Chinesium fittings for cheap that say they hold up to about 147 psi or 1 megapascal. And I'm going to see if that works out. Now, after I weld this up, I'm going to take some time and double check everything, double check my welds, double check that I've got the drive shaft hooked up correctly, and then maybe work on the engine just a little bit, because I've got some things that I need to do to that. Well, one of the other things I need to do before I can get this thing back on the road and actually start using it, other than tuning it, changing the spark plugs, and taking care of a couple of the other issues that are going on with vacuum advances, this pump, and everything like that, is fix the cooling system. Now when I bought it, there was no reservoir up top, and that hose directly feeds onto the ground beneath the truck whenever it gets up to a certain temperature. I don't much care for that, and since I'm gonna also have to replace the temperature sensor, which is just a little bit back there in the head, I dug through some of my grandfather's old mess and found a plastic reservoir that I think will work. It's not specifically for this truck because it's hooked up to be on the wrong side as far as lettering is concerned, but feeding it in through this side and letting it drain out through that side, I believe that I could have something that's at least a little bit more comfortable, and I don't have to worry about it running low on coolant because it starts overheating. Well, now that I've got the chassis of the truck done, I'm going to start working on the PTO. Now this actually hooks up to one of two ports on each side of the transmission. It's a 6-bolt pattern, so you can see right here. That bolts up to what you could call the vision port or window. These transmissions naturally have covers for each side of the transmission where you could hook a PTO or something similar. This one is one that my grandfather had a long time ago and has kept inside of the shop. So I'm going to work on freeing this up, cleaning it up, and then seeing if I can't bolt it up to the transmission. The PTO would be sitting right about there over top of the exhaust on the passenger side, and I believe the hydraulic pump for the dump bed would sit just about right here. I've got some drive shafts that I can cut up and use over there, and some U-joints. But for right now, I'm just going to work on trying to clean this thing up. I thought this was interesting, the fact that the Dana Corporation built it. And Jay, if you ever watch this, thank you very much for inspecting this thing back in the day, because it's turned into a real fine piece of equipment. This is about as clean as I could get it. Not too shabby, but definitely not to where I think it's show quality at all. But I'm going to keep this sitting off to the side until I get done and actually get to the point where I can set this in there and find a new gasket. Well, I've run into the fact that the PTO that I was working on right over there, it's turning like 1 to 3, which means for every turn of the input gear, there's about 3 turns of the output, or the shaft that connects up to the hydraulic pump. That won't work for me. This is much better. It's about 1 to 1 or maybe a half as far as ratio is concerned. I didn't want to use it because I found it pretty much exactly like this. I just took out the bolt, which you can see over here, or the center, and am working the shifter. But I'm going to clean it up. So you can see, that's the actual shift fork. It slides around that gear and allows it to move. So instead of the normal thing of having actually a shift collar, and that is what the shift fork attaches to, it's going directly around the gear. Well, it's time to do some pressure washing. Might as well get it all cleaned off before I paint it. Especially back there in the chassis and on the fuel tank, knocking off all this paint that's coming off. Well, I made a new gasket. So you can see just that little strip right there. Covered it on both sides with a little bit of RTB gasket maker. And as you can hear, that's your selector. And I've got it nice and tuned and solid. That's engaged, so as soon as I turn this, turns the whole shooting match. Disengaged. It's still going to turn this, but the mesh gear that's on that transmission with that truck only goes right here. So as soon as you are engaging it, that switches it on. Disengage just means it's not meshing up anymore. Yeah. Well, here I've got the new gasket that I made placed on here. Got a layer of gasket maker underneath it, and I'm going to let that set up with these bolts holding it on. And once that's set up just a bit more, I'm going to cover the other side while it's closer to the transmission underneath the truck with gasket maker and place it on there, bolt it down, and see if she engages. There's the PTO finally put on. So you can see I've got a couple fasteners that I had to mess around with either finding or making. And I've run into an issue. That's the correct side for the PTO to be on. And here is the exhaust hanger, which is directly in the way of me running a drive shaft to the hydraulic pump. So I'm eventually going to have to cut that thing and put it at a 45 instead of a 90. So trailing it from there to there. But that's a future issue for a future video. Well, here she is. I know there doesn't really seem to be that much of a difference other than the fact that I painted the bumper and did a little bit to front grille, but she's a new truck for the most part. I've shortened the frame, painted that frame, put on a PTO, adjusted the carburetor, put on a old stock, I should say, reservoir as far as cooling is concerned, and I've changed almost every fluid, including now the transmission. It's been a great project so far, and the amount of support I've gotten from you guys is astonishing. I just hit 75 subscribers just a little while ago, and to everybody else on the planet, it doesn't matter whatsoever, but to me, it's like a dream come true, I guess. I've been uploading a lot of videos to YouTube for a long time, and haven't seen much success with it up until now. And the fact that you guys enjoy the same stuff that I do is pretty amazing. I spend a lot of my time doing these things, and though my videos are pretty condensed, it's a lot of hours. I mean, I come out here and work in this shop on average 8 hours, 9 hours a day, and that's not to say I dislike it. I do it by my choice, but you get the condensed version because I don't want to sit around and waste people's time. And when I'm watching a video, it's the same thing. I want to get the knowledge and the expertise that they have gained over that time, and that's what I want to give to you all. But once again, thank you guys so much. This has been a great journey, and I've got a couple more videos in the works, especially on this thing, because we're only at part 2 out of probably 7. And once I get the connectors for the airlines in, I'll be able to put the dump bed on and finally start fabricating on that, which will be probably twice as much work as this thing has been, just to get everything functioning right, because instead of getting back to a functioning capability of stuff that's just already sitting around, I'm having to take something that has been off the road for probably over 50 years and connect that up to something that was never meant to really have a dump bed on it. But I'm excited, and I hope you all are as well. So if you could, please hit that subscribe button, or watch some of my other content. It would mean the world to me. And once again, thank you all so much, and hope you take care of yourselves. Come back anytime.